And good afternoon, everybody, and welcome here to the continuation of the 24 Hours at Sonoma, the second segment to be featured here on the SRA Sports Channel, as we have all 20 cars still in this field, but we did have a very eventful first segment over on Joshua Michael's channel, Crazy Chaos. If you haven't seen that yet, you're definitely going to want to go over there and check out segment 1, because a lot of stuff led up to where we are here in segment 2. And then, of course, if you want to check out segment 3, I'll be giving you the information on where that's going to be taking place very shortly. But we're getting ready here for our next 3-hour segment. The drivers that started out for their teams raced in segment 1. Now the second driver for each team is going to be getting into these race cars and going to be racing it around for 3 hours of length. On the point is going to be Mason Powers. The reason he's starting on the front row on the pole is because his co-driver, Ferdinand Gabot, ended up winning the first segment in that number 4. So we're going to be keeping an eye on everybody during the course of this race, because this is an endurance race. This is not a dash. This is not a race that'll come down to pit strategy. It's really about surviving for these drivers, because after this, there's still going to be another 6 segments that these drivers are going to have to go through, a full 24-hour length for these drivers. One thing that's also important is that 5 teams come into this race with only 3 backup cars left due to getting involved in incidents in segment 1 and having to go to a backup car. Each one of them allowed to bring 4 cars to this track, and some of these teams have already used up one of their machines, and those particular teams now are left with 3. And so we're going to be keeping an eye on that. Dion Scott Motorsports is one team that had that happen. Team California was another. J-Man Motorsports was yet another, along with Uper Motorsports and Dixon Racing. Now, for this second segment, it's basically the driver that was second in the lineup of the teams that either had 3 or 2 drivers for their team. And so we'll be seeing some new faces racing here in segment 2 as opposed to segment 1. So Mason Powers starts on the front row alongside of Jacob Crago. RJ Bishop was the one who finished second in segment 1, so Crago takes over in the second position. Third place is going to be Ray Takata alongside of Cody Lamas. Fifth place is going to be Annie Thomas alongside of the 76 of Dacian Weeks. There's some names I'm not familiar with, so please bear with me. Alex Hawkins will start 7th alongside of Kyle Corbett. Then it'll be Nick Pericles on the high side of the 11. That is Chase Alexander. On the outside of row 6, that is going to be the 26, which is a team, by the way, that only has 2 drivers. Riggleman drove the first segment, and Dante, I believe it's Lemieux, is how you pronounce that, is going to be the second one. You'll see Riggleman back in the car in segment 3, since they, I believe, do not have a 3rd driver for that team. And he'll start alongside of Stephen Pollard III in the 55. Nick Alton will start alongside of Trent Dunham. Robert Piet alongside of Theo Stegall. There'll be Keith Batson alongside of Henrietta Fitzwater. And then in the final row, it's going to be Niara Antiman and Tim Smith. So, let's go down and get the command to start them up, and we'll get these cars rolling here. Now, as I said, it's going to be a full 3-hour segment, which means that wherever we end up hitting the start-finish line at with the time, we'll go 3 hours from that. More than likely, it's going to be somewhere around like 5:45, I would think. So we would go to 3 hours, 5 minutes, and 45 seconds to get the full 3 hours in. Ferdinand Gabot was very dominant near the end of the first segment. Let's see if his teammate, Mason Powers, can get going early here. As the green flag is out. And we are underway. So at 3 hours, 5 minutes, and 50 seconds, that will be the end of this second segment. As they head up here into turn 1, This is probably going to be the closest we'll see for battling all day long, as things are going to get spread out pretty quickly. And already there's trouble back there. Some drivers just spun out on the very first hilly turn. Not certain who it was, as Mason Powers tries to pull away from Jacob Crago. As Stephen Pollard III is caught in the tire barriers. Nick Alton, I think, was collected in that, along with Chase Alexander. Everybody else looks like they got away from that instance, so we had about 3 cars involved in something there. Good battle here. Jacob Crago battling side by side with Ray Takata. That's for the second position. Ray Takata not going to force the issue here through the S's, which are very treacherous. Very difficult place to make passes, because where you enter into one turn can greatly affect your exit out of the next turn. So Ray deciding to stay in line in the third position, as that battle for that brief moment allowed Mason Powers to kind of start to open up a little bit of distance. Now, one thing about endurance racing is that incident we just saw there up in turn 1, well, that does not bring out a caution flag. There are local yellows, which, you know, lets the field know, hey, there's something that's happened up here, you might want to be aware. But there are no full course yellows. This thing's going to go green flag all the way for the full 3 hours. Basically single file all the way back through this field. There's a battle that's heating up back there, though, that I think would be around the 7th, 8th position. You've got Alex Hawkins running, I think that was in 6th. 7th place right now is Dejan Weeks, and he's actually getting a challenge right now from Kyle Corbett, who was the car I saw making some moves earlier. Trying to make a move here, and it doesn't look like he's going to be able to make the move this time, and he better look in his rearview mirror, because there is Dante Lemieux in the 26. Now, a number of drivers started at the rear of the field because of having to go to backup machines. And a couple of them have actually worked their way up here already. There you see Tim Smith and Henrietta Fitzwater. Smith now up to the 13th position after he started in 19th. Henrietta Fitzwater, I think, started 17th. They're actually going to take and battle each other there through the hard hairpin turn. And it looks like Tim Smith will hang on at least for the moment. Tim Smith driving the number 152 for Uper Motorsports. Chris Washer was not able to get that car to the end of the first segment before retiring, and so Tim having to start in a backup car. Looks like that car is pretty fast, though. Then right behind him there, Henrietta Fitzwater in the 51 for Team California. It was Jackie Tang, her teammate, who was unable to finish the first segment before he took his car behind the wall. You got Keith Batson back here, along with 13 of Niara Antiman. Now, Niara Antiman and Skylar Dixon, who drove this car in the first segment, are the only 2 drivers for Dixon Racing and that 13 team. So next segment, you'll see Skylar Dixon back in the car. And so that means that really Skylar Dixon only has 3 hours to get back, you know, back into the psyche of being ready to race another 3 hours. A lot of other drivers on these 3-driver teams get the benefit of about 6 hours before they have to get back in the car. So 2 teams in particular, Dixon Racing and Oracle Racing, there's a lot of pressure on their drivers not being allowed that long respite before getting back into their machines. There's Nick Pericles. One driver is on pit road. That is Stephen Pollard III in the 55. Now, the only thing that they got to hope for that is that they can get that car repaired, because if they don't go to the garage, then that car can be raced in the 3rd segment, and they won't have to worry about having to go to a backup machine. Stephen Pollard III driving for, so I'm trying to look through the driver's list here to see which team that he drives for. He drives for the Ant Motorsports, and they have not used a backup car yet. They still have 4 cars, including the one that currently sits on pit road. So if they can get him off track, even though he would finish many, many laps down, they wouldn't have to go to a backup car. And the one thing that's interesting about this particular endurance race is if you in segment 2, say, end up finishing off the lead lap, then in the next segment, you get back on the lead lap. You just start where you ended up finishing the previous segment. Case in point of that, Seth Cole finished a lap down in 14th in the first segment, but Trent Dunham back on the lead lap, started 14th in this race, and then 15th place in the last segment was John Cedino, 2 laps off the pace, but Robert Piet back on the lead lap, starting in the 15th position. So as long as you can just finish this segment, then you're going to get your car back on the lead lap, turning the reins over to the next driver in line for your team. Been looking here at Mason Powers' lap times. His fastest lap time was a 1:15.355. His last lap, 1:15.547. So doesn't look like he's holding back at all, and really he can't, because the other drivers from 2nd, 3rd, and 4th have been able to get themselves single file, and they may be able to try and work together maybe to reel in Mason Powers. Tell you what, though, that 4 car is strong. We saw it with Ferdinand Gabot in the first segment, and Mason Powers showing off the speed of that machine once again, as he's been able to really keep about maybe a 8-9 car length advantage between himself and the second place driver of Jacob Crago. They've not been able to really close up the distance on him at all. Let's see what his lap time is this time. Well, that time it actually went down a whole 3/10. 1:15.8, almost actually a 1:15.9, as it was an 8:97 at the line. So that's a whole 6/10 slower than his fastest lap, and about 4/10 slower than his last lap. So it's one thing about Sonoma, these elevation changes, the hot temperatures here, it really plays a big factor into tire wear for these guys, and grip, especially through those S's. Those S's are very slick when the sun's been beating down on them for a long period of time and you're on worn tires. Now, these drivers have only run a total of 6 laps right now. But remember, we don't count laps, we count time. And at the current moment, we are just now hitting, well, not hitting, but we're getting close to 8 minutes in this segment. Still a full 2 hours and would be 52 minutes to go. Like I said, race started at 5 minutes and 45 seconds. Actually, 4 minutes, I think it was actually 5 minutes and 50 seconds. So we gotta go all the way to 3 hours, 5 minutes, and 50 seconds before the race is going to be thrown under the caution, and these drivers will then come to pit road and swap rides with their fellow drivers. Mason Powers, right now, looking like he wants to give the pole position over to the next driver in line for him, and I'm trying to remember who it is. For some reason, I've got it where I cannot see my notepad completely with the game up. What we'll do right now, though, is things need to be settled out a bit. Let's jump back real quickly, take a look at a replay of what exactly happened to put us have us have our first incident of the day happen all the way back at the very start of this race, involving a number of drivers, including Chase Alexander and Stephen Pollard III. So let's jump back right now and see what exactly happened to cause that incident. Well, the best look for this is from the helicopter view, and let's see. Boy, they started leaning on each other here through the corner. There's a little contact right there, and that was, I think, well, there were actually a couple of cars there. Nick Alton was another there, along with Chase Alexander. That's Nick Pericles that was basically in the middle of all of it, and the car that made the initial contact, I think, was the 26th of Dante Lemur. Let's look at it one more time, and we'll see if we can pinpoint exactly what happens here, where the initial contact was. If you watch right there, the blue and white car of Lemur, I think he gets into Stephen Pollard III's right rear and turns him into the car just ahead of him, which is Nick Pericles. There's the contact right there. Then Pericles gets turned into, I think that's Chase Alexander's right rear. Oh, and then Steven kind of comes across Nick Alton's nose, and that's what spins Nick Alton out. Pericles did a nice job of keeping that car straight. Pollard was the one that seemed to carry a lot of speed into the corner, because he slid all the way to the tires, and the car actually did get stuck in the tires. Chase Alexander and Nick Alton, however, were able to get their cars turned back around and keep going, although they're quite a distance back from the rest of the field. So I think the initial contact out of all of that was the 26, but the 55 seemed to carry a bit too much speed there as well. Maybe there was a little bit of a shove there in the right rear from the 26 to the 55, and that's why Steven carried so much speed into the corner. But whatever the case, that's what caused the first incident. So far, we've been clean up to that point. So let's go back now to live action. As Mason Powers continues to lead, I have wonderful news. I have been able to actually fix my notepad so that way the font is small enough and I can read the whole thing. So I do know for certain who the driver is that's going to get the reins handed over to him via the 4 team, and that is Frederick Gabo. And so, yay! Yay for smaller fonts. So it's going to be interesting here to see just exactly what the fuel window is for these guys. They've gone 10 laps so far. And the lap times are definitely falling off. As I mentioned, for Mason Powers, his fastest lap was a low 1:15. Well, his last lap was a low 1:17, so 2 full seconds slower than his fastest lap. Let's look back here about these guys here. There's Jake Crago in second. Same thing for him, 2 seconds off his fastest lap. Now running the 1:17s. Same thing for third place Ray Takeda, and same thing for Andy Thomas. So all these drivers have fallen about 2 seconds off their fastest lap time so far. Here's 5th place. Got Cody Lamas right now holding that position. He actually just took that spot away, I think. Oh, no. No, he didn't. Okay, he's actually in 5th place, and right behind him is Alex Hawkins. Maybe getting ready to race it up for that position. Right behind them, too. If they get racy, then you've got 76 of Adasian Weeks. You got Kyle Corbett right there, along with Demi Lemieux and Trent Dunham, who all would be willing to pounce at any moment. Theo Segal there in the 11th position. There's Tim Smith 12th and Henry Fitzwater in 13th. And then they've got Niara Antiman in 14th, 15th Nick Pericles, Chase Alexander in 16th. Remember, he was one of the drivers that actually spun out in that incident up on the hill of turn 1. He was able to get the car refired, and he's actually going to try and see if he can pick up some spots here just ahead of him. Keith Batson lost the group pretty early. He's now back at 17th. 18th place right now, Nick Alton. There you see Stephen Pollard III. He has scored 20th, and he is off the lead lap. The scoring monitor tells us he is 2 laps off the lead. And then a long ways back, well, Robert Piet took and actually pitted. That's why he was so far back. So Piet is going to be the first car to hit the pit road on lap 11. Mason Powers deciding not to come this time. So everybody else is staying out at this particular point in time as well. So Robert Piet rolling the dice here. Maybe thinking about gaining some track position. I mean, we know for certain that when they've got the fresher rubber, they're able to run faster lap times. So if Robert Piet's got fresher rubber here, he'll be able to run maybe 2-second faster lap times than everybody else on track if he can get back to the 1:15s. And maybe, just maybe, that could help him gain enough track position to maybe be up in the top 5 or possibly be leading this thing. But there you see, back there is Mason Powers. He'll be coming up and closing in on this machine very shortly. Piet started this race 15th out of 20 drivers after his teammate John Citadino in the first segment finished 2 laps down. Right now, Robert Piet is on the tail end of the lead lap. And if he gets the cycle of pit stops to happen, then he would find himself, I think, in pretty good shape. Let's see if these fresher tires will help lap times at all. At the line, a 125. Now, the reason that's a 125, though, is because his pit stall, I think, was before the start-finish line. So we got to actually wait for the next time around to find out just exactly if those fresher tires are going to give him a faster lap time. His fastest lap of the race was a 1:16. Most of the other drivers, their fastest lap was in the 1:15s, around the 1:15.3s to 1:15.5s. Robert Piet, one of the few that did not hit that particular mark. So we'll see what he does this time. Heading into the hard right-hander here. Mason Powers just now heading into the first right-hander before that. And into the short shoot here. And he does have quite a distance between himself and Jacob Crago, who right now I think is just riding around. Currently just holding on to that second position. That 4 car is going to be a tough one to beat. they've got two things on their side. They've got a strong car and they've got good track position. All pretty much due to the great first place finish in segment 1 to Ferdinand Gabot. Let's see about the lap time this time for Robert Piet. I'd be surprised if it wasn't in the 1:30 or the 1:15s. 1:15.902, that's his fastest lap of the race. So there you see the fresh tires coming into play. One thing that Mason Powers does not have right now is fresh tires, because right at the moment he's still running in the mid 1:18s. His fastest lap is 1:15.3, so we can definitely see that his tires are falling off and it's affecting his lap times. I noticed back there in the tri-oval of turn, or not in the tri-oval, but in the hairpin turn of 11, there were a lot of drivers all lined up nose to tail, and there you see him here, being led by Cody Lamas. That's from 5th on back through, I think that's the 14th position. About 9 drivers in this pack. And this is when someone might make a mistake. They're all single file for the moment, so that's at least a good thing. But they are kind of all seeming to try and swap lanes and everything. You saw right there. That, I believe, was Hawkins going high there. Here comes Kyle Corbett on the inside, looking for a spot off of Dejan Weeks. Not going to be able to do it. Has to tuck back in line, and there you see the 26 of Dante Lemieux was actually going to try and make a move on Corbett. Couldn't do it. So it looks like passing is very difficult here for these guys. They're all trying to find where the best places are to pass, and Corbett now going to have a challenge for the 8th position from Lemieux. And Lemieux going to try and actually do it here in turn 11. Let's see if it works. Cuts it right down there on the rumble strip. Going to try and clear Corbett off this turn. Corbett going to get the run off of that corner, though. At the line, looks like Corbett may hang on to it. Battle on for 5th. And I think, yes he did, Alex Hawkins made it work. He takes the top 5 position away from Cody Lamas. That was an interesting move he made there. That was on the outside line, just past the start-finish line, heading up the hill that he made that move. So Hawkins finding a particular place that drivers are able to pass, and now he's actually opened up a little bit of distance there. About 2 car lengths between himself and Cody Lamas, as we'll bring up our ticker here. Show you who's running right now inside the top 10. Mason Powers enjoying a comfortable 4.5 second lead over second place Jacob Crago. Ray Takeda still hanging there in 3rd. Andy Thomas in 4th, and it says 5th place right now Cody Lamas, but that will change when they get back around to the start-finish line with Alex Hawkins now taking over that position. Now you can definitely tell that the lap times are definitely falling off. 1:19.4 and now 1:19.7 at the line for Mason Powers. So either they're in conservation mode now, or the tires are just really going away and he just cannot produce the fast lap times he was producing earlier on. And with it being an endurance race, my gut feeling tells me it's the latter rather than the former. I don't think in an endurance race you're going to be conservative, especially this early on. I mean, you think about it, after this, we've still got a total of, 18 more hours to go. So, yeah, the odds are not in favor of conservation at any point here. I mean, if you're racing in a big pack, maybe you're conservative because you don't want to wreck a good race car and have to go to a backup car for the next segment. But if you're Mason Powers and you're all by your lonesome and all this, I don't think you're in any way in conservative mode. And the fact that he's actually been able to grow his distance between himself and second place Jacob Crago, that also counters any argument that he may be trying to conserve tires and fuel. It's been very strong, though, I'll tell you that. Mason Powers, it did not take him long. He had about a 3-car length advantage coming out of turn 1 on the very first lap, and he's been steadily growing it ever since. He may have a full 5-second lead this time around, depending on how fast Jacob Crago was that lap. There you go, over 5 seconds, 5.15 seconds. So if you're Jacob Crago, there's still a long ways to go in this segment, not to mention the fact that you're going to have 8 more segments when you hand the reins over in the next segment to his teammate RJ Bishop. I mean, do you basically try and think about doing some kind of pit strategy to catch up to Mason Powers, or do you just ride around there in the second position and think to yourself, this is going to be some good track position to give over to my teammate? As a matter of fact, Crago is actually another one. There are actually 3 teams in this field that have only 2 drivers. This being one of them, Team Arizona. Jacob Crago currently driving RJ Bishop to take the ride back over in segment 3. He ended up finishing second in segment 1. And then, of course, the other 2 already mentioned, Dixon Racing with Skylar Dixon and the current driver, Niara Antiman, and then Oracle Racing with Mark Riggleman and the current driver, Dante Lemieux. If you take a look at some of these teams and the drivers we'll be seeing in segment 3, there are a couple of names that pop out, drivers that are very good at road courses. One of them would be the team of the 51, currently being driven by Henrietta Fitzwater, who I believe is just outside of the top 10. There she is in the 12th position. That ride going to be handed over to Jamie Pintor in segment 3. So if she could get this thing up there into a good starting spot, maybe be able to see Jamie do some magic here at Sonoma. And then another one would be the team of the 155, which is right there. Oh, I'm sorry, not that one. 155 is actually Stephen Pollard III. No, he's not. Where's the 155? There it is. Cody Lamas, who's currently in the 6th position right now. That ride would be handed over to Nathan Hudson in the next round, the next segment. Nathan Hudson, a very good road course racer. And you look here, too, at a number of drivers that, with this track being stationed in California, there's a lot of drivers in this field, whether they're racing right now or not, that are from California. Mason Powers is actually the leader, a native of California. A couple of other drivers that stand out include Henry Nova. We'll be seeing him in segment 3. Same for Jamie Pintor. Jackie Tang, we saw in segment 1. He's from California. Alex Miller, who we'll see in segment 3. Then you've got also the entire team of Canadian racing with Joseph Strigley, Dejan Weeks, Jake Haynes. They're all from California. The 89's first driver, Deanna Vasquez, that we saw in segment 1, also from California. And then you got Charles Sanford for Uper Motorsports, and the current driver, Cody Lamas, in the 155 for TA2 Racing, also out of California. So there's a lot of California natives here that would love to be able to, with their team, win at what may be considered their home track. A lot of other drivers from California consider Auto Club Speedway their home track, but this is a track in California, and I'm sure a lot of their friends and family have turned out here to see this 24-hour event. Mason Powers continuing to dominate this race. This is pretty much what endurance racing is all about, though. Endurance racing, there's not a whole lot of battling that goes on particularly. It's more about who's got the best machine and who's got the car that's going to endure the longest, and the driver that's going to endure the longest. See a lot of rubber laid down in that one particular turn. I have a feeling that's where a lot of the rubber has been left in this race, maybe this turn as well. That has caused these lap times to really just fall off really quickly. Now running 1:21 lap times is the leader, Mason Powers. One thing I've noticed, though, is even though the tires are obviously wearing due to the current lap times, something tells me that that car is pretty easy to handle, because I have not seen that car step out of on him at all. And here we go. Looks like pit stop's going to take place. There was actually some skid marks coming into pit road. I don't know if that had anything to do with anything, but there were indeed skid marks coming onto the pit lane there, just to the entrance. If you just saw it with Mason Powers hitting pit road. Annie Thomas deciding to stay out as Ray Takeda comes to the pits. So Annie Thomas, I believe, would take the lead over. Yes, indeed. Jacob Crago, I think, may have hit the pit lane already. There's Robert Piet. This will help him out. Oh, Crago already had been to pit road. All right. So Crago already pitted. Nick Alton on the pit lane. There's Antiman, Stegall, Pericles, Hawkins, Dejan Weeks, Cody Lamas. There's Ray Takeda, and there's Mason Powers. Done with his pit stop. And Robert Piet gets around him. Now, here's my questioning. Does this put Robert Piet out in front of Mason Powers? I don't think Mason Powers lapped Piet. As I'm looking, no, he didn't. I think Piet could maybe cycle around as the leader. Now, of course, we're still waiting for Annie Thomas to come to pit road. There she is. Lemur has not come to pit road either, nor is Corbett, Tim Smith, Trent Dunham, or Henrietta Fitzwater. Keith Batson also still needs to hit pit road, and here they come. So, I'm curious to find out if Robert Piet, if this worked for him, and he's going to get to spend some time out in front. Now, because he pitted so much earlier than everybody else, he'll be on pit road a lot earlier for the second round of pit stops, but he'll at least get to have a little bit of time out front. And who knows, maybe, based on what the fuel window could be, maybe at the end of this thing, Robert Piet could find himself in a position where he is leading this thing at the end of the 3-hour segment. It's not impossible. There's a lot of teams that, in these endurance races, especially in 3-hour segments, they will do what's called reverse pit strategy, where they'll actually go all the way to the end of the race where they think it'll be, and they'll plan their fuel strategy accordingly. And there you see Ray Takeda passing the Annie Thomas machine, so Takeda will move back into third. Jacob Crago, though, is closed up on Mason Powers. And looks like Robert Piet now is hitting pit lane. So, any chance that he had of being able to lead this race, he just gave it up, coming to pit road. So the lead will, I'm sure, cycle around to Mason Powers. Annie Thomas currently being scored as the leader over Corbett. Those two pitted, and I think that because they had their pit stalls so close to the start-finish line, or maybe past the start-finish line, that's why it scored them still in first and second. It should cycle back around to Mason Powers as the leader, but he's got Jacob Crago right behind him now. That huge gap that he had before is completely gone, and I would love to see how he made up all that ground in Crago. So we may have a battle for the lead on our hands here in a mere moment, as indeed Mason Powers, Jacob Crago, they're scored first and second again. Third place, I believe, will be Ray Takeda. And then I'm not certain who after that it would be. Looks like it's the 76 of Dejan Weeks scored in fourth place. Annie Thomas now back to fifth. Fifth place is sixth rather, Theo Stegall. And seventh is going to be Dante Lemur. Eighth place, Cody Lamas. Ninth place is going to be Chase Alexander. And rounding out the top 10, that's going to be Nick Pericles. It's quite a comeback there for Chase Alexander, who was involved in the incident on the very first lap. Was able to get the car refired, turned back around, and kept going. And now he finds himself up in the 9th position. That's quite a comeback for him, and we are just about maybe a sixth of the way through this race now. A little bit more than a sixth of the way. As we are still watching Jacob Crago trying to do something here with Mason Powers. These drivers started first and second for this second segment. And those two right now look like they're the ones that are going to be battling it out, at least at this particular moment, unless something happens. I am still curious to find out where those skid marks heading on the entrance of pit road came from. And if I'm looking at the scoring monitor, the only driver that maybe possibly could have been involved in that might have been Alex Hawkins, because there he is scored in the 19th position now, and we know for certain he was up in the top 5 before these pit stop cycles happened. He had taken that 5th position away from Cody Lamas. So why don't we, while this right now appears to have settled out between Mason Powers and Jacob Craigo, let's try and find out who it was. There was some kind of an incident that obviously took place coming to the entrance of pit road during the cycle of these pit stops. Let's see who it was. My money's on Alex Hawkins, but could have been somebody else. Well, I just found out. Robert Piet, remember he pitted a lot earlier than everybody else? Well, I just found out it wasn't by choice. This was a battle right here. This is Nick Alton and Keith Batson, Robert Piet, all battling for position. And boy, Nick Alton right into the back of Piet. Piet gonna spin down into that tire barrier, a little bit of the wall as well, and right there you see he crossed the commitment line because he was spun down there and there's really nowhere he can go. And so Piet was basically forced to have to make a pit stop. So that explains why Robert Piet was on pit road so much earlier than all these other drivers. It wasn't by his own choice. He got turned down there off the nose of Nick Alton. So that is a tough break there for Robert Piet. Fortunately for him, he's been able to remain on the lead lap, and that kind of explains now why he pitted with the rest of the other drivers, because now that puts him back on the same pit sequence as them when he originally did not have any plans of going off the pit sequence with everybody else. So that is what happened to Robert Piet, and this was quite a ways back as well, I just found out too. So didn't see all of that smoke and the skid marks there at the entrance of pit road until just now, but apparently that was something that was definitely replay worthy, as that's what's caused Robert Piet to be so far behind everybody here as far as coming to pit road several minutes earlier than the rest of the field. Back to live action now as Mason Powers continues to lead. We are just now around 35 minutes into this segment, which means that we still got a long ways to go, a little bit less than 2.5 hours left. We've already had a little bit of stuff happen here, most of it early on in this segment. We had an incident happen up on the very first corner of the very first lap, involving Stephen Pollard III, who has now fallen 3 laps down to the leaders, but is still running. A couple of other drivers that were collected included Nick Pericles, Nick Alton, and Chase Alexander. All of them have been able to continue and still are running on the lead lap. And then, of course, that incident we just saw take place between Nick Alton and Robert Piet, which caused Piet to be way off the pit sequence of everybody else. Let's give you a full field rundown here, as Mason Powers is your current leader. Second place is Jacob Craigo, but he's, like before, starting to now fall off the lap times of the leader and is very slowly losing ground, now almost 3 seconds back. In third place is going to be Ray Takita in the 98. Been in the top 5 all day long. Fourth place is going to be Dejan Weeks. And in 5th is Annie Thomas. Theo Segal runs in 6th. 7th place, that is going to be Dante Lemur. 8th place, Cody Lamas. 9th place is Chase Alexander. And completing the top 10 is Nick Pericles. Nick Alton's had quite a day. He's been involved in 2 incidents we've had during the course of this race. He's currently still in 11th place, though. 12th place is Kyle Corbett. 13th is Tim Smith. 14th, Trent Dunham. 15th place, Henrietta Fitzwater. 16th is Keith Batson. Then it ways back in 17th, but still in the lead lap. That is Robert Piet. 18th place is going to be Niara Antiman. Something happened on that machine. Don't know what. Might have been a slow pit stop or something. Currently in 18th place. There's Alex Hawkins, also way back here in 19th, and he was up inside the top 5 not too long ago. And then the last car on track that is currently 3 laps down, if we can find him. I know he's still running. At least I was pretty sure he was. Is Stephen Pollard III out of the race? Got him scored 8 laps down, but I thought for certain that Stephen was still running. Saw him out on track. Did something else happen with him? Because he was back on track. He was about 3 laps down and he was back on track. Something's telling me that something else just happened with the 55 of Stephen Pollard III, who was just trying to ride this segment out. So, boy, if it's something important, we really should break away. I'm just going to real quickly here use the drop-down box and see if he is out. So, something else happened. And maybe, just maybe, if we can find out what happened to Steven, we then will end up finding out as well what exactly might have happened to cause 2 drivers in particular, them being, yeah, who are the 2 that I was just trying to think of? Oh, yeah, the car of Niara Antiman and Alex Hawkins. Why they're so far back. So, yeah, I think this is a good opportunity. We'll just break away again real quickly, see if maybe something happened to take Steven out of this race and cause those other 2 cars to lose so much track position here just around closing in close to the hour mark of this second segment. Well, it had nothing to do with Antiman, but it had everything to do with Alex Hawkins. This was, again, another incident very similar to what we saw with Robert Piet. And we know that Stephen Pollard III was a bit damaged, and there you go. Just, boy, it's that braking lane there for the drivers that going into turn 11. Some drivers want to slow down a little bit sooner than others, and Hawkins just ran Stephen Pollard III over. Now, neither one of them were planning to come to pit road. That much is clear, but they were both trying to maneuver their way through turn 11, and Hawkins just ran Stephen Pollard III over. And there you see the car erupting in smoke for Steven. That was a hard hit for him. Not exactly an easy hit for Alex Hawkins either, but that explains why Hawkins was so far back and why Steven is out of the race. Look at the engine, the smoke pouring out of it. So that is a tough break there, because now Stephen Pollard III and the Ant Motorsports and the next driver, Alex Miller, will have to go to a backup car. They've got 3 cars left now, as one of them, as you can see, is just completely gone. The engine and everything. That car badly damaged. Second incident of the day that Steven's been involved in as well. And this one's going to be the death knell for that team, at least here in the second segment. So that is what happened there to Alex Hawkins to put him so far back. I looked to see, before we came back to live action, if there was a reason why Niara Antiman was so far back. And actually, I found out that the reason that Antiman is so far back is, while everybody else came to pit road and changed tires, Antiman actually only did a gas and go. And we already know that when the tires wear down, the lap times are going to be much slower. And so that would then say to me that with those old tires, Antiman's just not able to turn the laps necessary to keep up with everybody else who did get tires when they came to pit road. Matter of fact, let's see what Antiman's lap times are right now. She's running in the 118.6s, which are somewhat similar to the leader, surprisingly enough, but she did not take tires when she came to pit road. So, I don't know. Do not know. I am a little confused on that strategy, too, because last thing you want to do is blow a tire. And there's the answer right there. Last lap time, I just said, was a 118.6. This time, a 119.2. So those tires are quickly falling off again. The only reason I can think of that maybe she was keeping somewhat decent lap times was because the tires maybe cooled down a little bit with having to stop for that brief moment on pit road. And now that they've heated up again and they're wearing down once more, that's really killing her lap times. Still a one-man show out in front. Mason Powers, he's gotten a challenge from Jacob Crago a while back, but that's really been the only contender that Mason Powers has had. So unless something drastic happens with the car or a big mistake is made by Mason Powers, I think you're going to see that 4-car out in front for quite potentially this entire 3-hour segment. Saw Ferdinand Gabot put on a pretty dominating performance in the first segment, so that 4-car is strong. They get the track position in each segment with starting on the pole position. That could be a key factor into this race at Sonoma. But, as I said, after this segment, we still got a full 18 hours left. So it ain't over till it's over. Anything can still happen. So far we've had only one driver out of this segment, and that of course is Stephen Pollard III, so that team will be going to a backup car for segment 3. Not to say we haven't been without incidents though. Alex Hawkins damaged and off the pace, still running though. As this time by, let's see how much the lead has grown here for Mason Powers. Last time it was 6.3 and almost over a full 7 seconds over Crago this time. As a matter of fact, Crago's about to maybe lose second place. I just noticed Ray Takata has closed up on his back door. So this is a battle for the second position. Let's see what Ray Takata can do here. Now remember, they are battling for the second position right now, but this could also potentially be, I say potentially because we're still going to have a full 2 hours left of this segment to go. This could potentially be a battle for the second starting spot in segment 3. Crago will be turning the reins over to RJ Bishop. Takata would be turning the reins over to Eugene DeMax. Love to put their co-drivers in a great starting spot for segment 3, which we've seen pretty much here in the first hour of this second segment is key into making sure you're going to be out there in front and not getting into trouble especially. So right there, Ray Takata take turn 11 a little bit wider than Crago did. And we know for certain in the battling we've seen down into turn 11 that the outside line gets a nice run on the exit of that corner. Running fourth place right now by his lonesome, there he is Dejan Weeks. Nice job by that 76 car. Running all by his lonesome, trying to reel in second and third place Crago and Takata, and trying to keep ahead of Annie Thomas. Right now just riding, I would think, at the moment in that fourth position. Dejan Weeks is going to be handing the reins of that car over to Jake Haynes in the third segment. Joseph Srigley ended up finishing that car in 6th place in the first segment. So Weeks has been able to pick up 2 spots during the course of this first hour of segment 2. As a matter of fact, if you look, trying to see here, the one that has probably fallen the most out of the drivers that started up at the front, I would have to say, would probably be, it would be team of, I'm trying to see here, yeah, the 979. We know that Alex Hawkins ran into trouble with Stephen Pollard III when they were down in turn 11, but Bryce Riles, who was the first driver in that car, finished the race in 7th place. And now Hawkins is just trying to hang on to being on the tail end of the lead lap. This battle's not going to go away. Ray Takata still hounding Jacob Crago for that spot. And you see there that Ray Takata is not really forcing the issue, taking some of these turns a little bit wider than you normally would see a driver take, because Ray realizes that she's basically just going to have to capitalize if Crago makes a mistake. Doesn't really want to stick her nose down in there and cause both of them to spin out, because both of them are right now in very good positions of second and third. And it looks like too, if you gauge the two of them, Ray is a little bit faster getting into the corner, but Crago's better getting off the corner. It looks like Ray Takata's coming to pit road. Did the leader come to pit road? Nope, Mason Powers stayed out. So Ray Takata's coming into pit road just around 50 minutes into this first segment. And it looks like it's going to be the 98 alone. One driver, I think, just dipped onto pit road. Couldn't tell who it was. Looked like a red car. And that is Chase Alexander and Robert Piet doing the same. So Ray pulls into her pit stall. Chase Alexander and Robert Piet doing the same. Antiman and Hawkins both staying out. And now we gotta wait and see exactly how long it'll be before Mason Powers comes back down the pit lane. Just about 15 seconds away and we will hit the 50-minute mark here in segment 2 of the 24 Hours of Sonoma. And Mason Powers, nope, not going to come to pit road this time. And there you go, 50 minutes in this race complete for the second segment. And Crago's not coming, neither is Dejan Weeks. What about Annie Thomas? Nope. Theo Stegall and Dante Lemieux, they're staying out again. How about Cody Lamas? He's staying out, so it doesn't look like anybody else is coming to pit road yet. So maybe a little bit of short pitting on the part of Ray Takata and Chase Alexander, Robert Piet. We'll see. Surprised one driver we haven't seen on pit road yet is the 13 of Nyara Antiman, because we know for certain Antiman did not take any tires during that last round of pit stops. So it could be a test maybe too, maybe to try and figure out how long they can go on tires than on fuel, because you know, you take the car, you fill it up with fuel, and it takes about as long as it does to change both left and right side tires. So, you know, I mean, I know that they're trying to chip away every little bit they can to be able to gain some time on their competitors, but you want to run the risk of having a flat tire and then falling off the lead lap and being completely out of the picture of having a good starting spot for your teammate in the third segment. I mean, you got to kind of weigh it all in the balance. Mason Powers continuing to lead the way. We'll have to pit maybe before this first hour is over. Not confirmed. And really, with that short pitting now, we don't really exactly have a good idea of what the fuel window is for these guys. From what I could tell, it was somewhere between 27 to 30 laps that they could go on one tank of fuel, but now I'm not so sure. And things have really seemed to settle out. I think the best battle on track right at the moment might be Cody Lamas, Nick Pericles, Nick Alton, Trent Dunham, still back in the 6th position on back. This has been a train that has really not gone away for the last 20 or so minutes. Cody Lamas has not seen a clear track in his rearview mirror for quite a long time. But the good news for him is he's been able to keep them all at bay. They've not been able to make moves on him. This is a long train that has really formed up and stayed formed up even after they were all separated in that cycle of pit stops. You got Lamas there, Nick Pericles, Nick Alton, Trent Dunham, Kyle Corbett, and we got Fitzwaters in that group. And now they kind of break up a little bit, but they'll form right back up again. It's been what they've been doing for a good portion of this race. And oh, maybe they're going to split up now. 3 of that group are coming in. Cody Lamas, Nick Alton, and Nick Pericles. So now that'll split the field up a little bit there, at least that group of cars. See what the strategy will be here for the 155. Giving up the 6th position to come to pit road. Theo Stegall also is on pit lane, along with Dejan Weeks and the leader Mason Powers. So they all decide to come down pit road here. This is on lap 41. Powers is done. Weeks has now completed his service. Cody Lamas in. There goes Stegall completing his stop. So the lead, I believe, would cycle over now to Jacob Crago in the 63. No, wait a minute. That's not Jacob Crago's car. There he is. No, he already had pitted too. So going to cycle around to... No, one cycle to Weeks. Maybe Annie Thomas. Annie Thomas stayed out a little longer than everybody else. And I think she would cycle around as the leader, but now she's coming to pit road. see if, I think her pit stall is after the start-finish line. So we will see if it scores her as the leader when she crosses that start-finish line. Start-finish line is just down here. And I think she will cycle as the leader. Maybe, or maybe Trent Dunham. Yeah, I think Trent Dunham's actually the leader. Indeed he is. Trent Dunham over Kyle Corbett. And then I think that's Tim Smith right there in the third position. Those are going to be the top three at this particular point as they decide to stay out an extra lap. Welcome back, everybody, here to the 24 Hours of Sonoma. Continuing on segment 2 here. We are just nearing the 1 hour mark of segment 2, so this race will be officially 4 hours in length. And it's been all Mason Powers out in front for sure. He has been the car to beat, as he is right now. Actually right now he's in second to Ray Takeda. Ray Takeda, I think, rolled the dice a little bit, decided to play some strategy, and she's actually the leader right now over Mason Powers. But the question is, how long is that going to last? But I'm not alone in the booth right now. Special guest coming up here, a guy that actually will be climbing into a race car in the segment number 3, and he'll be piloting, as soon as I can find it, he'll be piloting that ride right there, the number 12, currently under the driversmanship of Trent Dunham, and that's Michael Norman. Michael, thanks for being here.
You had to pull me out of bed to get here for this race today, but man, is it gonna be fun to see these cars go around this racetrack. I personally love Sonoma.
I got to apologize too. I mean, I know that you were resting up, gonna take this 3 hours and gonna get rested up for your segment, but I needed your expertise here in the commentator's booth.
It was fun, you know, just watching this race from the start. It's really been, you know, I can tell everyone's really having fun out there. Even though, you know, the cars are all really spread out and stuff like that, it's still very, very fun to race around a track like this. And like I said, Sonoma's my best racetrack, so it's very, very fun to watch and see where I'm going to be starting whenever Trent gets out of his ride.
Well, right at the moment, Trent Dunham is, I believe, scored in the 15th position, but we've seen, especially in the first hour, that things have really shaken up as far as strategy and everything that's playing now. As a matter of fact, I thought I just saw Theo Stegall on the pit road, so some strategy being played out there. For those of you that have just joined us, only one driver is out of this race, and that is Stephen Pollard III. However, this race has not been without incident. We had an incident in the very first corner. That involves Stephen Pollard III, as well as Nick Alton, Chase Alexander, and a couple of others. And then we've had two incidents coming onto pit road. Robert Piet getting turned by Nick Alton, and then the latest one, which was Stephen Pollard III, getting turned by Alex Hawkins. So, not to say this race has been without incident, but for the most part, these guys have done a great job of keeping this race pretty clean.
Yes, they have.
So Ray Takeda trying to get some distance between herself and Mason Powers, who has undoubtedly dominated this race for the first third or so. But Ray Takeda trying to put up a bit of a fight here, and she's actually been able to pull away a little bit from Mason Powers. So if you're Ray Takeda, I mean, Takeda ended up getting placed, if I'm not mistaken, I'm looking real quickly here, I think she ended up having her co-driver, who was James Joseph, finish in third for her in segment 1, so she started in third place, so she's trying to up that by 2 positions and give a good starting spot to the next driver to take over that ride in segment 3, Eugene DeMax.
Yep, it's all about starting in good places, and however you need to get there.
So you've gotten a chance to be able to see the first segment, you're watching here in the second segment. What's some of the points of this particular track and the way that these cars are running it that you think you're going to apply in the third segment?
Say that again. You kind of lagged a little bit.
Oh, okay. I was just saying that with what you've seen so far in the first segment and now here in the second segment, with the way the track conditions are changing and everything, is there anything that you're taking from this that you're going to apply in the third segment?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you can tell you can tell how the track is handling for these drivers just by this, and I'll be able to go down onto our pit lane and radio communicate with Trent, asking him about how the car is handling and what adjustments I want for the car. That way, when he comes down to make the driver swap, the pit crew can do the adjustments while we're swapping. Oh my God, I feel like I'm sick, but I'm not.
Well, that's not good.
It's just stupid allergies.
I've had allergies this morning too, so I know exactly how you feel. Ray Takeda right now is leading the way, but the strongest car of the day, undoubtedly, Mason Powers, is starting to reel her in. Now a little over 3 seconds back, and I think Ray Takeda is going to have to come to pit road at some point a little bit earlier than Mason Powers did. Powers is going to have to contend with a now lap machine in Robert Piet in just a moment, and he's got Theo Stegall right on his back bumper. But Mason Powers, I'll tell you what, so far in this race, that 4 car has been the strongest car of the day, and you had Ferdinand Gabot in segment 1 dominate that, and Mason Powers has been dominating up until this point. Now he's trying to reel in Ray Takeda, and he's doing a good job. This is actually the first time we've actually seen all day the second place driver actually try and reel in and almost pretty much succeed on reeling in the leader. So it's looking like Mason Powers is going to definitely be the driver to beat here. Wow, a little bit of hard racing there with Theo Stegall. Stegall going to back out of that. And now Ray Takeda may have her hands full with Robert Piet right on her back bumper. Got to remember, too, this is a track where we've seen that rubber and fresh rubber comes into play here and helps your speed times. And Robert Piet has much fresher tires than Ray Takeda does, so he can get a lot better run out of the corners. And he is all over Ray Takeda, and here he comes. He's going to go to the inside. This is a battle to get back onto the lead lap.
It's always a good thing, especially when these. I haven't seen how. I've been asleep, so I'm not sure how the session ends. Is it just like a caution flag?
Yep, caution flag will be coming out for these guys when the section's over. That's correct.
All right. Well then, it's a good thing to do when the caution comes back out for the end of the segment is to be sure to be on the lead lap, so that way you can be in a chance to try to win this whole thing.
Yeah, like we said at the top of the program, if you do finish a lap down, then you do end up getting back on the lead lap for the next segment, but you're mired way back in 15th, 16th, 17th, and as we've seen, you start at the back. It's very hard to work your way through traffic, especially early on, because that's when the drivers, for the most part of the entire segment, are the closest together, and that's when the trouble breaks out. Speaking of that, that's a question that I should ask you is, with the fact that you know that when segment 3 comes around, all the drivers are going to be pretty much the closest they will be that entire segment, what is your strategy there, knowing that it's probably going to be utter chaos on the first few laps as drivers are going to be jostling for position?
Well, you always need to get the best position you can. If that means you have to use your bumper, then don't be afraid to use your bumper. It's all about prime real estate on road courses, and you know that damn sure.
Yep, absolutely. Mason Powers just made the move around Ray Takeda, so very short-lived lead for the 98 car as Mason Powers moves back to the front, and now he'll try and open the distance up again, this time over Ray Takeda. The car that he's been mostly running away from for the majority of this race is mired back in third place. There he is, Jacob Crago, with a possible battle from Dejan Weeks in the 76. Jacob Crago's been pretty consistent here today. I don't think that car is really falling outside of the top 3. And looking pretty good right now. But the one thing that's really been tough for him is he's just not been able to really close up the distance between himself and the current leader, Mason Powers. So he's had a strong car, but I think that Mason Powers has been just a little bit stronger. There it's. This is this. Oh, go ahead.
I can tell you one thing. I am excited to be able to try to climb into that race car because I just want to get out there and race at my favorite racetrack next to Watkins Glen, and that is Sonoma.
Now, you remember the 24-hour Le Mans, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Now, in your opinion, which of these two is probably the most difficult on the driver, both mentally and physically? I mean, Le Mans is a very long racetrack. Sonoma is not really that long racetrack. It's like a short road course. So, in your opinion, which one do you think is probably the tougher for these drivers? Because a lot of drivers that take part in this took part in that event as well.
Yep, and it's just like it's just like we've always talked about. It's all really going to come down to the driver's real estate in their position on the racetrack on this restart. Because it's hard to pass at a road course if you don't have your car set up the right way, and if you can't get a good enough run through a certain corner. So it's going to be interesting to see if any of these drivers can try to pass somebody.
Yeah, I've seen a number of drivers actually try and use a little bit of the outside line off these turns, which allows them the opportunity to get a bit of a run. This has definitely got to be the comeback driver for me. Chase Alexander got involved in that incident all the way back on lap 1, the very start of this segment. He ended up spinning out. He's worked his way all the way back up to the 5th position, and that's not an easy thing to do, especially at an endurance race where there's no cautions to help bunch the field back up.
Agreed.
Andy Thomas right behind him, trying to run Chase Alexander down for a spot inside the top 5. And then there's Dante Lemur in the 26th and the 7th position. Nick Alton, who's had his fair share of troubles today, in 8th. And there's a battle for 9th. These two haven't really been, haven't ceased their battle for pretty much this whole race. You got Cody Lamas right there with Henrietta Fitzwater. These two ended up starting pretty far back in the field, and both of them worked their way up there into the top 10, and both of them have continued pretty much for the last, I'd say almost the last hour, been battling for the same position on track constantly.
Yeah.
And this could be a little bit of cat and mouse, sizing up your opponent perhaps, maybe trying to figure something out for later on in the race. Keith Batson now in 11th. Trent Dunham has worked his way now up to the 12th position. Nick Pericles now in 13th. 14th place is Tim Smith. And there's Kyle Corbett in the 15th place. He's really dropped off the pace in the last few minutes or so. And then it'll be Niara Antiman in the number 13. We already documented her problems as she is still, I think, yet to make a pit stop. And she's running on 2 pit stops worth of old tires. And then Alex Hawkins right now is in 17th, and Robert Piet-Theo Segal 18th and 19th. They're the last 2 cars on the lead lap, just a ways ahead of Mason Powers. So out of 20 drivers that started segment 2, 19 of them are still on the lead lap, just a little bit past the 1 hour and 10 minute mark.
What happened to the 20th?
20th car, Stephen Pollard III, retired from the race.
Steve Bobbin didn't sweep through a race.
Yeah, he got turned down pit road into the tire barriers and the engine exploded, and that was about maybe 45 minutes after he had gotten turned into the tire barriers of turn 1 on the very first lap. So he's had a pretty tough day.
Yep, sounds really like it.
Just want to remind everybody that this is a 24-hour race, and it will be taking place over the span of 5 YouTube channels. If you haven't seen segment 1 that led up to this point, be sure to head over to Joshua Michaels' channel, Crazy Chaos. Segment 2 airing here on NSRA, as well as segment 3, so don't go away when this segment's over. You'll have segment 3 here. Then segment 4 going to be on Robert Piet's channel, Tasman Dutch. Then Jamie Paintor will take over segment 5, DVS on NBCSN. Segment 6 will be at Utica Home Track Series, John Cedillo's channel, and segments 7 and 8 will finish out on Joshua Michaels' channel. The links to all of those channels are down in the description. Be sure to head over and subscribe to them to be a part of the full 24 hours of action. So Mason Powers is certainly looking like he is at least the dominant driver, if not the dominant car. Now, when it comes to road courses and track position and how well your car handles, this looks like a prime suspect of one that could be the contender for the win, even though we're only in segment 2. What is there out there from a driver's perspective that can completely ruin the chances of a dominant car.
If you just get too tired. If you just get too tired or overdrive a corner, or if you just notice something or just get off your game for the slightest second, you could ruin your race. And that's really all it's going to take.
I'd have to think, being here on the West Coast with the heat of California too, that a little bit of fatigue would probably come into play here, because you're spending about 3 hours in a car, and it's not like you're racing a track where, say like Auto Club or something, where it's a fast track and you're able to get the race over with fairly quickly. There's not a whole lot of acceleration braking ratio, but here at a track where you literally are working the throttle and the brake just about every turn, you got the heat, you're going to be in this car for 3 hours, that's got to get to you at some point.
Yeah. It's like I said, you can't get too tired.
Oh, Ray Takeda not only lost the lead, but now she's lost a spot inside the top 10 as she apparently has hit the pit lane, and now Dejan Weeks moves up to the second position with Annie Thomas in third. As a matter of fact, I believe Jacob Crago may have also just made a pit stop. I might be wrong. He fell all the way back to the 7th position. There he is. Yeah, I think he just recently made a pit stop too, so now we're starting to see the pit stop cycle around again. And the question is, when is Mason Powers going to be hitting the pit lane? As we know, the fuel window is somewhere between 20 to 30 laps. Not exactly sure where it is, because we've seen a lot of drivers do some short pitting strategy, but it's been about maybe 17 laps since Mason Powers was last on pit road, so we can expect to probably see him coming down very shortly.
Yes, I would imagine so.
One thing,
unless he tries to push it.
Oh, we've seen some drivers do that. A couple of drivers have actually pushed it an extra lap or two in order to gain some track position, and it's kind of worked for them. One thing I got to ask you here, I mean, I've seen so many different things here at this track that these drivers are having to contend with, but the one thing that really seems to be the big thing that these drivers are having to contend with, and I think it probably would be contributed to the heat, is the tire wear here at this track. We've had these drivers, when they get 4 tires and fuel, they're able to run in the 115s. Right now, Mason Powers is running 120s, actually almost 121 lap times, as the tire rubber just continues to wear away on those tires. That's going to be something that you're probably going to have to contend with as well. But as the day wanes on and the tires are going to be on a little bit cooler surface with the dusk arriving, I mean, do you think that the tire wear is still going to be a factor?
Tire wear is a factor at road courses no matter what time of day it is. So you'll see cars try, especially in the later stages. It wouldn't surprise me to see cars trying to push it that little bit extra to try to get good strategy. Just because you'll hear some people scream, "I need to come in for tires, need to come in for tires," but it'll happen, and I guarantee it.
Well, right now it looks like we did have another driver that was up inside the top 5 hit the pit lane. That was the current second place driver, Dejan Weeks. He's now on the pit lane and will drop, I believe, outside of the top 10. Mason Powers deciding to stay out an extra lap here. Now, if you're Mason Powers, I mean, right now he has a 17-plus second lead over the second place driver, currently Annie Thomas. So I don't think that staying out on these older tires is necessarily going to hurt him as far as losing track position to those guys, but it is a little bit risky, especially knowing that this guy has the strongest car on the track.
Yeah.
So right now, Mason Powers, we're still waiting on him to come to pit road. Same for Annie Thomas, same for Nick Alton, Trent Dunham, Tim Smith, Henrietta Fitzwater, Keith Batson. I believe those are the drivers that are still yet to come to pit road for this cycle of pit stops. And one thing that I was mentioning back during the first hour is that teams, and I know that you and I and Trent have done the same thing, a lot of teams for each segment do what's called reverse pit strategy, where we kind of look at the checkered, where we think the race is going to end, and we plan when we're coming down pit road, what we're going to take for tires, for fuel, etc., pretty much backwards from the end of the race to the beginning of the race. And that's probably, I'm thinking, what some of these drivers are thinking of doing as well. As far as Mason Powers, I'm not sure he really has a strategy. I think it's just go out there, run until you've got no more fuel left, and then come down pit road.
Yeah. Well, we'll be surprised to see someone come down and they were just coasting.
And the ironic thing about this race, this segment, is that the toughest part of the track for these drivers has been pit road. Now, I'm not saying that pit road was the cause of the incidents that we had, but two incidents, one with Stephen Pollard III, Alex Hawkins, and then the other one with Robert Piet and Nick Alton, was kind of like the brake checking problem that we see down in that hairpin turn 11, and they ended up spinning down to pit road and hitting the safer barrier and the tire barrier there. So not to say that pit road's the cause, but it certainly has played a factor into quite a bit of the incidents that have taken place in this race.
Yes. That pit wall is always very treacherous.
Here comes Mason Powers, so he stretched it all the way to lap 60. So apparently they are kind of on the strategy of 20 laps and then we come in. Because they came in around lap 20, they came in around lap 40, and now they're in around lap 60. So if we're going to gauge it based off of the leader, then the fuel window is pretty much about 20 laps. See if anybody else hit pit lane. Yep, looks like Nick Alton is in.
Told you cars will try to stretch it.
Yep, Cody Lamas also on pit road, and there was another driver as well. That's Nick Pericles in the 47. Keith Batson still staying out along with Henrietta Fitzwater. I believe Annie Thomas also stayed out. And I think she would cycle around as the leader. There she is. Just coming up on Jacob Krago. So we're still not yet completely cycled around with this round of pit stops. Annie Thomas, Henrietta Fitzwater, Keith Batson are the three that still have to come to pit road. And they'll probably come down pit road this lap. Although Annie Thomas, the last round of pit stops, actually stayed out about 2 or 3 laps more to be able to gain a little bit of track position.
Exactly. And that's what it's going to take.
Exactly, yeah, you're right. Annie Thomas driving the number 49 for Painter Alexico Racing. She'll be handing that ride over to Ryan Fitzy in the third segment, and now she's going to hit the pit lane. So her time out in front, very short-lived, but might be able to gain some track position off of it. And look at how far back Henrietta Fitzwater and Keith Batson are. That's second and third, and they hadn't yet even exited the S's. Oh, Keith Batson's going to stay out as Fitzwater hits the pit road. Batson's going to try and stay out and lead another time. Now, this is interesting because Batson's running pretty much near the rear of this group for majority of the day, and now he's starting to step it up and kind of be a factor in this.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to see how that works.
You can see right there behind him, I think that is... Yeah, I think that's Dejan Weeks. How much the tires are key into making passes here. Look at how quickly the 76 is going to get around the 5 car. Almost as if the 5 was going about 15 miles per hour slower, which he might have been because we know that those tires are pretty worn.
Oh, yeah. Your car gets slick as a greasy surface whenever you have old tires at this racetrack.
And this track is a track of elevation changes too, so I'd have to think that slickness is exemplified, especially when you're turning left, right, especially downhill on these S's.
Absolutely.
It's interesting too, though, that we've had the tire wear problems with these drivers, but nobody's really had any problem of keeping their car on track. I remember a lot of races that I've commentated here at Sonoma. Drivers have found themselves going off track and having to regroup, getting back on track. Nobody's really encountered that today.
It's because they've been smart to keep themselves on the racetrack and stuff, but we still have roughly 30 plus minutes left in the segment.
Yeah, we still got about, at this point, I would say we've got about 36 minutes left to go in this hour segment. And then we still got a whole hour to go before segment 2 is over. As Keith Batson completes his stop, and looks like the car that actually passed him, Dejan Weeks, is actually the leader. So nice job. I don't think so. I think he came down pit road the earliest of everybody. So that kind of says to me is that with coming down pit road, having the fresher tires, it's helped him to turn fast enough lap times that he was able to get around everybody. And he's got about a 7-second lead over Mason Powers. So that says to me that at least the spotters, the crew chiefs, somebody has noticed that 4 car is the strongest car, and they've got to try and beat him whatever way they can. We saw Ray Takeda roll some strategy, stay out ahead of him, and now Dejan Weeks rolling some strategy here as well. That's what they got to do, pretty much. And Dejan Weeks, he's had to actually fight his way up here. We mentioned that it's hard to make passes and get track position here at this track. He started the 6th position, so he's done a great job of working his way all the way up here to the front at this point in time. Now 6.62 seconds over Mason Powers. Now we saw before that Ray Takeda was pretty easily reeled in by Mason Powers. It'll be interesting to see here Dejan Weeks, who I think had about maybe 4 laps earlier than Mason Powers on pit road. Be interesting to see just exactly how much of a distance he can keep between himself and Mason Powers, or if Mason Powers is again going to be able to run down a driver that used strategy to get track position against him.
Yeah, and it'll definitely be very interesting. That's why I love these kinds of races.
We're going to have to see what the field looks like after the cycle here on the start finish line, but it's looking like a couple of names that we haven't seen up inside the top 5 may have made their way up there, as Mason Powers just crossed the line a little under 6 seconds back now. He is closing the gap up between himself and Dejan Weeks. And indeed, the case is that there are a couple of new faces up inside the top 5. Chase Alexander, we just talked about him and his comeback. Well, now he's up to the 3rd position. Right behind him, that is the Dante Lemur, number 26, who was outside the top 5. And how about Tim Smith? Tim Smith started this race all the way back, I believe it was in the 18th position, and he has worked his way up all the way to 5th place. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe, and indeed that is the case, that was a backup car because Chris Washer wrecked the primary car in segment 1.
Yeah, that's a very good racing right there.
So maybe some names that we might not have expected popping up here towards the front, and if these drivers can last until the next round of pit stops, maybe some more strategy will be played out, and we may see a new leader out in front. So far, we've had about, I'd say, 5 or 6 different leaders of this race. Mason Powers obviously the one that's led the most laps. Dejan Weeks right now leading. Also, Ray Takeda's been out in front. Anthony Thomas has, and if I'm not mistaken, I believe Trent Dunham was out for a lap or 2 as well, leading this race. So we've had our fair share of drivers leading this race, but it's all going to come down to who's leading once the caution flag comes out to finish out this 3-hour segment. Last time by, I believe Mason Powers cut down the lead by 0.2 of a second, and you can see him there looming in the rear of that camera view through the S's. So Dejan Weeks, his time out in front may again be short-lived, as Mason Powers has definitely locked in this track. He has found the fast groove, and he is closing in once again to take over the top position here in this endurance race.
I shall be right back in the booth here. I gotta go take care of some business.
Alright. One thing that's going to be awfully interesting is that Ferdinand Gabot was really strong in that 4 in segment 1. Mason Powers has undoubtedly been strong here in segment 2. It'll be interesting to see, based on where that 4 car finishes this segment, which, in my opinion, appears to be that he'll be starting on the pole. Frederick Gabot will be taking over that ride for segment 3, and it'll be interesting to see if it's the car or if it's the driver behind the wheel that makes the difference, because both Ferdinand Gabot and Mason Powers have been really strong, and in my opinion, based on what I've seen, it's obviously the driver, but I think that is one strong machine that they're driving as well, as Mason Powers continues to close the gap up between himself and Dejan Weeks. Now, one thing that we've seen here at Sonoma, passing is very difficult unless it's you on fresh tires versus your opponent on old worn tires. And if Mason Powers can run down Dejan Weeks, catching him is one thing, passing him another. So we'll have to see just exactly how aggressive Mason Powers decides to get if he catches up to Dejan Weeks in an attempt to take the lead back. This time at the line, Dejan Weeks going to cut it down by, oh wow, 1.1 seconds. He blazed it on that lap. Now about 2.6 seconds off the back bumper of Dejan Weeks, and there you see him, looming large in the back of that camera shot. And he will be looming large in the rearview mirror of Dejan Weeks momentarily within probably the span of 2 laps, maybe 1, depending on how he gets through the S's here. I mean, if he does another 1.1 cut down, that would put him only 1.5 seconds off the back bumper of Dejan Weeks, number 76. Mason Powers snaking through the S's, hunting down Dejan Weeks, who has done a great job today, kept himself for the most part in the top 5 all day long. And now it looks like he will be having his tenure as leader of this segment coming to an end very shortly, as we'll see just exactly how quickly he was reeled in that lap by Mason Powers. This last time by 2.6 seconds. This time, 1.4. So a 1.2 second cut down by Mason Powers. So his lap faster than his lap before. Dejan Weeks running 118.3. Mason Powers running the 117.1. That is why the lap times, or why the lap advantage, the lead advantage, is cutting down so quickly. Now, this is a road course, so there is no drafting, and there is no slipstream, but that is all car by Mason Powers, and he is going to be, I wouldn't be surprised if he might try making a move down here in turn 11, because he is quickly reeling in Dejan Weeks in the 76. Let's go on board with Mason Powers as we're going to follow him and his trying to pass Dejan Weeks for the lead. He is right there. But like I said, you heard a lot of playing with the throttle there. The passing lane has basically been taken away from him every time by the rear bumper of Dejan Weeks. Dejan Weeks fighting as hard as he can to keep the Coca-Cola number 4 in his rearview mirror, but in my opinion, it's just a matter of time Mason Powers got a nice run there through the S's. He might be able to make a dive bomb move here into turn 11. And is he going to try and go to the inside? No, can't do it this time. Runs about a slight groove higher than Dejan Weeks. And still remains right on his back bumper. Dejan Weeks just hoping that he can hold off Mason Powers until the next round of pit stops would be somewhere within the next, I think, 10 to 12 laps. Because we know that if he lets Mason Powers on by, Powers is going to drive away. And Dejan Weeks cannot afford that if he's going to have this strategy that he's been working on end up coming to fruition. That time, Mason Powers letting off a little bit, giving a little bit of space to Dejan Weeks, maybe setting him up here for this right-hander. Best part of the track for Mason Powers has been the S's, but the S's are so zigzaggy, there's very little opportunity to be able to make a safe move for a pass for position. And the thing about these two is as they continue to battle amongst themselves, they are so far ahead of the third place car of Chase Alexander that they can pretty much just concentrate on each other and not have to worry about that third place driver. And here comes Mason Powers. He set him up for turn 11. He'll move to the inside line. And Mason Powers is going to try to take the lead here, coming to the start-finish line. Dejan Weeks trying to battle on the high side. Drag race to the line. Powers will lead that lap. And with the fresher tires, he's going to move around back to the lead.
Boy, it looks like I got back just in time.
Yes, you did. A heck of a battle going on here the last 3 or 4 laps as Mason Powers trying to set up Dejan Weeks and now succeeds in making the pass. And the new leader is once again the strongest car of the day, Mason Powers in the 4. But now the question is, Mason Powers, I think he came to pit road about 2 laps after Dejan Weeks did, and he used up a lot of tire rubber trying to run down Dejan Weeks. When Dejan was running the 118s, Mason Powers was running the 117s. So now you got to wonder, did Mason hurt himself in trying to aggressively run down Dejan Weeks for the lead, and will that cost him in the strategy that his team had set up with him pitting just about every 20 laps?
I don't know. I guess we'll have to find out. By the way, while I was gone, I ordered us the Sonoma breakfast special.
Ooh, what they got in that?
Chocolate chip pancakes.
Uh-huh.
Some let's see, we got your choice of coffee, hot chocolate, chocolate milk, or orange juice.
Orange juice goes best with pancakes.
And of course, you got some bacon, maybe some sausage, or some hash brown.
Ooh, can we have all 3?
Yep.
Yes! Oh, whoa, there's some skid marks there!
Uh-oh.
Skid marks on the top of the hill. Some dust also kicked up just a few hundred feet past that. And there's more dust kicked up here. Somebody's run into trouble here. And I'm wondering if it was Jacob Crago. So, a race that's gone relatively clean for a good 45 minutes, almost to an hour, suddenly something has happened up just at the beginning of this track and appears to have carried over down into the hard right-hander onto the short chute. So Mason Powers out in front is now opening his lead over Dejan Weeks. We're going to step aside, try to see if we can find out what happened. If that was Jacob Crago, that's a driver that's been up inside the top 5 for pretty much most of this race. Here's what happened. Battle for the 8th position. Kyle Corbett. Right behind him is Cody Lamas. Behind him, I believe that is, oh, wow. Nick Pericles in the 47, then Henrietta Fitzwater in the 51. Cody just kind of turned Kyle Corbett. And then look at that. Man.
All 3 car.
Yeah, 3 of the 4 all collected right there. Pericles, Lamas, and whoa, Corbett gonna go up the hill. No, don't hit the porta potty.
No, there's probably somebody in there.
There's somebody in there taking a dump. Don't be mean. Don't make a bad day worse. And there you see where the dust was kicked up there. Now, apparently, all three of them were able to keep going because they didn't really hit anything except for that little elevation change in the terrain. But they had to throw, obviously, a local yellow there to let Keith Batson know that he had to slow up, as they all going to merge back onto the track. And we do want to apologize if we scared the person in the porta potty. Probably if they didn't have to go and somebody told them cars were coming towards them, they've become pretty well flushed out.
Yeah.
They had the crap scared out of them. Okay, let's go back to green. So we now have, we're nearing about 20 minutes left here in segment 2 of segment 2. Second hour of segment 2, I should say. Still a full hour after that to go. And Robert Piet hit the pit lane just moments ago, so the pit stop's beginning once again. Robert Piet pretty much has been the first one on pit road for most of these green flag round of stops. He and Theo Stegall both. Mason Powers, though, continuing to lead the way. And if my calculations are correct, we should see him on pit road on lap 80, if they stick to the strategy that they've been having. Maybe, though, with the amount of rubber he used to run down Dejan Weeks, we may see him a little sooner. And Piet works his way back onto the tail end of the lead lap once again. And if I'm not mistaken, still... Oh, no, wait a minute. We got some drivers that are... couple of laps down and everything. Oh, wait a minute. We've got some problems that have taken place here that we haven't seen. The 13 of Niara Antiman, the 98 of Ray Takeda, and the 12 of Trent Dunham are all listed several laps down, and I don't believe they are on track. So something has taken place here that we apparently did not know about.
I saw some skid marks up there by the pit wall, unless that was just left over from Stephen Pollard.
By the pit wall. Oh, wow. Actually, I don't think you're wrong. I think those are fresh skid marks.
We might have to go take a look and see what just happened.
I think we're going to have to, because we've got 3 drivers, for reasons unknown, that are listed out of this race. Cody this is a lap down, but I think that was due to the spin out we just saw him have. So as the pit stops are now cycling around again, we got to go back. We got to find out what happened to Ray Takeda, what happened to Trent Dunham, and what happened to Niara Antiman during this second hour of segment 2. So this was back around lap 57. Almost shades of what we've seen the last 2 incidents here on the pit lane. This time Jacob Crago turning Niara Antiman, and they both just turned down to the entrance of pit road, smoke erupting out of the 13, and that would explain, remember I said that Crago had been running the top 5 all day, and he was all the way back in the 16th position. That explains why.
Yes, it does. Now, I'm wondering what happened to Trent Dunham.
Let's try and see if we can find out what happened to him. Maybe he and Ray Takeda getting together, because both of them retired out of the race in the same lap. This taking place on lap 59, a couple of laps later. This, I think, was a battle for position between 4th place Trent Dunham, 5th place Ray Takeda. And can you say Sonoma glitch?
Yeah, I definitely can say that.
Apparently there's an invisible wall in this portion of the course, and oh my goodness!
Ray Takeda about flips over right there.
Up and on the passenger side door, does come to rest on all 4 wheels. She did not drive away from the incident. Trent Dunham, on the other hand, made it a full circuit around the track before he came to pit road and retired, and that would explain then why he is scored ahead of Ray Takeda on the running order. But that is why 3 drivers that we didn't know why they are out of the race, well, now we know why. Some interesting wrecks taking place here.
Yep.
When we've been pretty much clean for a good portion of this race, now they're starting to wreck it up a bit.
Agreed. I don't know.
So we got 3 more drivers out of the race joining Stephen Pollard III. One driver now off the lead lap, that being Cody Lamas after the spin with himself, Nick Pericles, and Kyle Corbett. But the one thing that seems to remain constant is Mason Powers is still the dominant car of the day and is still leading this race. Let's go back to live action. Mason Powers just now hitting the pit lane as we got just about maybe 12 minutes left in this second hour.
And I just got word that our bank account has been rolled out and it's getting ready for the next hour.
Yeah. Annie Thomas is now the current leader. Again, rolling the strategy that she's been on for pretty much this whole race. Staying out about a lap or two extra. And it's helped her to stay inside the top 5, but nobody has been able to hold a candle to the strength of that 4 car of Mason Powers.
Very, very agreed.
As we look at the running order, and I'm hearing myself twice. Hello, myself.
You're probably going to hear an echo.
We got Trent Dunham in 17th to finish this race, so that's where you'll be starting segment 3, Michael. Ray Takeda 18th, 19th Niara Antiman, and 20th Stephen Pollard III. 2 drivers are right now off the lead lap. Jacob Crago, after the incident we saw him have with Antiman, he is a lap down. He's actually just now back on the lead lap because of the pitting Annie Thomas. And then 2 laps down is Cody Lamas in the 16th position, now 1 lap down due to Annie Thomas pitting as well. So the lead, I should think, would cycle back around to Mason Powers, but I think Keith Batson just stayed out an extra lap. Yes, he did. So it's all really going to come down to time. It's got to be difficult in strategizing to strategize against the clock rather than against a set number of laps.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, especially when you're always on timed races, you know, the fun thing that you gotta look forward to is where are you gonna be when the caution flag flies?
I mean, take a case in point of the whole Kyle Larson thing that took place where they were trying to strategize when the rain was going to come. They were basically strategizing against the clock of when the rain was going to come rather than a set number of laps. So that's what these drivers are kind of having to do. If you take the rain cloud and turn it into a caution flag ending the segment, you got pretty much the same scenario for all these drivers, as Keith Batson now will come to pit lane, and that should turn the lead over. Well, it might turn it over to Tim Smith if he stays out, and he will. So Tim Smith, for the first time today, will be going to the lead as he'll pass Keith Batson. And so Tim Smith going to stretch it an extra lap now. Chase Alexander now going to be in second, and Dejan Weeks will then be in third. Now, I think the 76 of Dejan Weeks has already been to pit road. The 152 and 11, I do not think have. As you see, Chase Alexander now going to try and go to the inside. Whoa, a little bit of a bump and run there on Tim Smith. That was close, and it's a good thing Tim Smith was able to handle it, because we could have had our top 3 at this point completely wiped out. And they will still remain side by side between Tim Smith and Chase Alexander through the S's. Now Alexander will clear for the top position. So this is, I think...
That would have been.
Yeah, that would have been not good.
Seth, I'm getting told our pancakes are currently being made right now.
Oh, I'm getting hungry now. So Chase Alexander, well, maybe the 11, 152, and 76 have already been to pit road. So if that's the case, now this is putting even more pressure on the strongest car of the day, Mason Powers, because now he's not only going to have to catch one driver and pass him to get back to the front, but now it'll have to be 3 drivers. And it's interesting that every single time we have a round of pit stops, more players come into the factor of trying to, in some way through strategy, dethrone Mason Powers from cycling it back around in the lead. And a guy that had spun out on the very first lap of this race, had to recover all the way from the 18th position. Now about 1 hour and 50 seconds later, or 1 hour and 50 minutes later, I should say, is out in front leading the second segment of the 24 Hours of Sonoma. So that's a great comeback for Chase Alexander, and it just shows you how you can never predict these kind of endurance races.
And if my math is anywhere near correct, we have just over an hour still left in this race.
Yep, we're going to be, at this particular point, I think we're at about 1 hour 53 minutes. We'll have about 7 minutes left here in the second hour before we'll take a small commercial break and then be back for hour number 3. But this thing is certainly shaping up to be a race of strategy to try and get track position for segment 3. And, you know, it's so interesting, too, because you think about the fact there are 8 segments in this race because of the 3 hours times 8 making the 24 hours. And already we're only on segment number 2, and these drivers are already strategizing perhaps for that final segment.
Yep. Especially those who have to get on backup cars will be able to start completely fresh. You know, the right now people, they're tuning their backup cars just how they were for the real race. Even though they can't quite get on the racetrack to test it, they're just going to have to base it off what they already had in the race car.
And you mentioned something there, too, with backup cars. I mean, how about Tim Smith? They did not get a chance to be able to at all test that backup car, and he's up here in the second position running really well. So, yeah, I think you're right. They do have to kind of base it off of their other machine that is already out there. And look at Mason Power going to go 2 for 1. Allergies. Gotta love him.
Yeah, so much for showing his dominance and trying to having the past 3 cars. He's about to get 2 right now.
Yeah, I know.
And he did.
Yes, he did. He got around both Tim Smith and Dejan Weeks. Now he'll try and run down Chase Alexander. So every single time it looks like somebody is getting into the realm, if you will, of Mason Powers and the dominance that his car has had. He just kind of makes them look like they just do not have what it takes. So now we'll have to see just exactly how long it'll be for Chase Alexander to hold off Mason Powers. We've seen Ray Takada try to do it. We've seen Dejan Weeks try to do it. But nobody has been able to be up to the task of keeping that number 4 in their rearview mirror.
Well, you never know. And Chase Alexander's leading, but we'll see how fast the 4 is going to try to catch him.
Chase Alexander's last lap time was a 1:17.2, so he's not holding back, that's for sure.
Well, the wait and see. It says it's a 4-second lead, but if you were to go back, I don't know if that's 4 seconds.
Let's take a look and see at the line. I'd be surprised if that wasn't a 3.8 second lead now. And at the stripe, officially, oh wow, even lower than that, 3.5, 3.5 seconds. He cut it down by a full 1.2 seconds right there, that lap.
Fresher tires. He has a couple laps fresher tires than the rest of them, so he can push it a little bit more.
So it's going to come down to, for Chase Alexander, Tim Smith, Dejan Weeks, it's going to come down to them hoping that the caution comes out just a couple of laps after the cycle of pit stops. For Mason Powers, he's hoping that it's going to come out a couple of laps either before or several laps after the cycle of pit stops, because it seems like that is when he is out in front the most.
I hate to say this, but I think this is the most frame rate you've ever had during the race.
I actually agree with you, and I actually found out the secret of why.
Why?
I ended up turning the trackside objects like the stadium and everything, you know, the stands and everything, I turned them off, kept everything else on, and it works a lot better. So, go figure.
Yeah, but that just makes it look like an empty racetrack, though.
I know, that's true. That is true, and that's one thing that I kind of don't really like, because it doesn't make it look like a real race, but it does help the frame rates anyway. So,
yeah,
gotta choose one or the other. 2 seconds now, the advantage that Chase Alexander has over Mason Powers. You can see there, Mason Powers has that thing dialed in, and we actually had a change for third place, as now the 26 of Dante Lemieux has now moved up into the third position. Now Dante steadily, every single time we've had these green flag pit stops, has picked up a couple of spots on pit road, and right now he's now up to that fourth position. And if I'm not mistaken, the way that he's running in comparison with the drivers he just passed, I think he might be on the same pit strategy as Mason Powers. So, if they can somehow close up some distance between themselves and Mason Powers, we may be looking at the one guy who might be able to dethrone or at least be a contender with Mason Powers for the win in this segment. This time at the line, the advantage between Chase Alexander and Mason Powers cut down to 0.6 of a second. And now, you remember before when Mason Powers waited and bided his time to make the move on Dejan Weeks to go back to the front. Now we're going to have to see what he's going to do here and how much patience he'll have with Chase Alexander to try and make a move to go back to the front once again. He made a very clean pass in turn 11 on Dejan Weeks, but it took him about 3 laps of riding around, waiting for his moment to do it. We'll see how long it takes him to get around Chase Alexander, as he is right there, less than a car length off the back bumper. Down the S's, which has undoubtedly been the strongest part of the track for Mason Powers. Let's see if maybe he can set him up here for turn 11 right now. And not close enough to make the move this time, unless he tries the bump and run into turn 11. No, instead, going to run about maybe a half groove higher off that corner and let Chase Alexander lead another lap, at least for this particular point. Also looking to see if maybe Lemieux in the 26 has closed up the gap. He has, 3.79, so we may have 3 drivers in the hunt for this thing if Mason Powers cannot make the move on Chase Alexander quickly. There's Lemieux right there, the blue and white machine, just in the camera shot. So we could have a 3-car battle for the lead here in just about a lap and a half or so. Chase Alexander trying to do all he can. And here comes Mason Powers diving it down here in this corner. Let's see if he can get around Chase Alexander in the S's. Alexander will have the advantage here in the first turn, and he will at least hold on to the lead here for this portion. Just barely out-dueling Mason Powers there in the entrance of the S's. And as these two continue to battle, Dante Lemieux continues to reel in these top 2. Folks, we are past the 2-hour mark, but we are not going to break away just yet, because this is starting to get good up here at the front, and we could have a 3-way battle for the lead. We'll take our break as soon as we can, but we are going to try and stick here and see what's going to happen between Chase Alexander, Mason Powers, and Dante Lemieux, and who is going to come out on top in this battle for this lead.
Seth, that beep means our pancakes are done.
Ah, okay. You scared me. I looked out the window thinking I heard some car doors closing. Here comes Mason Powers now, going to try and make the move here. Up onto the rumble strips goes Chase Alexander. Now let's see who's going to outbreak who coming into this right-hander. And Mason Powers trying to battle there. Can he get around the outside? Whoa! Chase Alexander up on the rumble strip there. And that's going to cost him. Mason Powers is going to get back around for the lead. And Dante Lemieux was not able to get up there in time to be able to push past Chase Alexander for the second position. So now, Mason Powers back out in front. Now we're going to have to see if Chase Alexander is going to put up much of a fight with Dante, as Dante will try and get around Chase and try and reel in the Mason Powers machine, which has now gone back to the front. Dante Lamore now on the back bar of Chase Alexander. Now, if he takes a long time getting around the 11, that's going to allow Mason Powers to pull away. The only thing that could be a factor is that the lap machine of Cody Lamas is not too far ahead of Mason Powers. So if Mason Powers has any trouble getting around him, Dante Lamore may be able to capitalize. And now Dante going to go to the inside for the second position off of Chase Alexander. Let's see if he can clear him here. Heading into the S's, not going to be able to do it this time as they're going to be side by side in the entrance of the S's. See if he can get the run around the outside here. Looks like he will do it. Exact same place that we saw Mason Powers make the move on Chase Alexander. And now Lamore is clear of the 11, and now he'll try to go back to work on trying to run down Mason Powers, who is slowly reeling in the lap machine of Cody Lamas. Folks, we're going to take our next commercial break. Michael, thanks for joining me. Good luck in segment 3.
Thank you so much.